Who let this thing onto my stage? Security!
The second judge threw a box onto the stage.
Clean up before you leave.
Here to make a fool of yourself. Get out!
Caldwell snatched his application, read aloud,
No training, no education,
crumpled it.
a waste of time!
I'm here to sing, sir.
Go on, sink. When you fail, no stage in this country lets you near again.
All right.
The boy didn't pick it up. No anger, no tears.
I'll show you.
The audience laughed. But after his first note, no one laughed anymore, especially the judges. South Memphis, the kind of neighborhood where hope packed its bags a long time ago and never came back. Cracked sidewalks, boarded up windows, corner stores with bulletproof glass between you and the cashier. That's where Byron Shaw grew up. He lived with his grandmother, Loretta, in a shotgun house so old the walls had given up trying to stay straight. The roof leaked every time it rained. The front porch sagged in the middle like it was tired of holding itself up. Inside, the paint was peeling, the floorboards creaked with every step, and the kitchen faucet dripped all night long. A sound Byron had memorized since he was a child, because most nights it was the only thing breaking the silence. Every month, Loretta sat at her kitchen table with a handful of bills and made the same impossible decision: electricity or food. Never both. Some weeks, dinner was rice and canned beans. Some weeks, it was rice and nothing. Byron wore clothes pulled from the church donation bin. His shoes had holes in the soles that he stuffed with folded newspaper. On mornings when there wasn't enough change for the bus, he walked 3 miles to school, rain or shine, summer or winter, without complaint. His father never existed. Not in photos, not in stories, not even in questions Byron had stopped asking years ago. His mother left when he was 3 years old. Just disappeared one morning. No goodbye, no explanation. She left behind 2 things: a sealed envelope with Byron's name on it and a cassette tape. Loretta kept both inside an old shoebox under her bed. She told Byron about the tape once. He asked what was on it. She looked at him for a long time and said, "You're not ready for it yet, baby." He never asked again. Now here's the thing about Byron Shaw, and this is the part that doesn't make sense on paper. This boy had never taken a music lesson, not one. No vocal coach, no piano teacher, no theory class, no choir scholarship, nothing. He couldn't read sheet music until he was 14, and even then, he taught himself by staring at hymn books in the church pew and matching the notes to what he heard. His voice didn't come from training. It came from something no school could give and no teacher could explain. When Byron was 4 years old, he stood up on a wooden chair during Sunday service at Greater Grace Baptist Church and started singing along with the choir. The congregation turned around, not because a child was singing. Children always sang in church. They turned around because that voice didn't belong to a child. It was full. It was clear. It carried across the sanctuary like it had been doing this for decades. Pastor Williams stopped the sermon. The choir went quiet. 200 people stared at a 4-year-old boy standing on a chair, singing like heaven had handed him something and forgotten to take it back. Loretta, who had directed that choir for 26 years, looked at her grandson and understood immediately. This wasn't something you taught. This was something you protected. From that day on, she didn't give Byron lessons. She gave him space. She played old vinyl records in the living room, Pavarotti, Mahalia Jackson, Aretha Franklin, Sam Cooke, and let him listen. Byron didn't study the music, he absorbed it. He'd hear a Pavarotti aria once, twice, and by the 3rd time he was singing it back, not mimicking, but translating it through his own voice, his own instinct, his own God-given instrument. He sang every single day. In the living room with no fan during Memphis summers that hit 105 degrees. In the church every Sunday morning. On the sidewalk walking home from school when there was no bus fare. No microphone, no amplifier, no audience. Just raw voice and 4 crumbling walls. And without knowing it, those years of singing with nothing, no equipment, no technology, no help, trained his lungs, his diaphragm, his resonance in a way no conservatory on earth could replicate. He learned to fill a room with nothing but breath and bone. That was Byron Shaw at 18. A busboy working the night shift at a barbecue restaurant, bringing home $63 in tips on a good week, handing every cent to Loretta for rent. A high school graduate with no college plans, no savings, no future anyone could see. And a voice that God forgot to give instructions for. One evening, Byron came home from his shift and found Loretta sitting at the kitchen table with a printed confirmation email in her hand. She had walked to the public library, used one of the free computers, and registered Byron for the National Young Voices Championship in Nashville, the most prestigious televised vocal competition in the country for singers aged 18 to 25. The registration fee was $90. Byron stared at the paper, then at the empty pill bottle on the counter, the arthritis medication she was supposed to refill that week. "Grandma, you needed that money." Loretta didn't blink. "That medicine keeps me alive a few more months. But if you don't go, that voice dies in this living room forever. I'm not allowing that." Byron wanted to argue. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because deep down, he knew she was right. That voice had nowhere to go in South Memphis. No stage, no opportunity. No door that would open for a broke black kid with no credentials and newspapers stuffed in his shoes. So he went. He took a Greyhound bus to Nashville. 14 hours, one transfer, a sandwich Loretta wrapped in foil tucked into his bag. He arrived at the Performing Arts Center carrying his sheet music in a plastic grocery bag, wearing the only pair of dress pants he owned, hemmed too short, ironed 3 times to hide the wrinkles, and shoes he had glued together the night before. The lobby was a different universe. Contestants rolled in with designer luggage, personal vocal coaches, and folders stamped with the logos of the finest conservatories in the country: Whitfield, Eastman, Thornton. Parents carried bouquets, managers carried contracts. Everyone carried confidence. Byron stood near the entrance holding a plastic bag, watching all of it, and for the first time in his life, understood the exact distance between where he came from and where he was standing. A woman in the lobby glanced at him, then at his shoes, and pointed toward the service hallway. "Deliveries go around the back, sweetheart." He didn't correct her. He just walked to the registration desk, set down his plastic bag, and said, "I'm here to compete." The night before round 1, Byron sat on the edge of a thin mattress in a shared dormitory room. The competition provided private suites for contestants affiliated with registered music institutions. Byron didn't qualify. He got a cot in a room with 3 other singers who looked at him once, said nothing, and went back to their warm-up routines with portable speakers and vocal coaches on speakerphone. Byron had nothing to warm up with. He sat cross-legged on the bed, sheet music spread across the blanket, mouthing the words to Schubert's Ave Maria in silence so he wouldn't bother anyone. At 11:14 that night, his phone buzzed. It was his manager from the restaurant. "Byron, I'm not running a charity here. You're scheduled tomorrow night. You show up or I give your shifts to someone who will. That's it." He hung up before Byron could answer. Byron sat there, staring at the phone. If he lost that job, next month's rent was gone. Loretta's electricity was gone. The bus fare, the groceries, the refills at the pharmacy, all gone. He reached into his bag and pulled out the competition withdrawal form. It was already half filled out. His hand hovered over the signature line. The door opened. Nathan Brooks walked in. Tall, blonde, Whitfield Conservatory jacket, the kind of easy confidence that came from never worrying about a light bill. He was assigned to a private suite, but had come to grab a phone charger he'd left behind. He noticed the sheet music on Byron's bed and stopped. "Hold on, is that Schubert? You're doing Ave Maria?" Byron nodded. "Classical?" Nathan looked genuinely surprised. "Where did you study?" "My grandma's living room." Nathan didn't laugh, didn't smirk. He stood there for a second, then said, "No pity, no performance, just straight. That's a beast of a piece. Good luck, man." And he left. It was the first time anyone at this competition had spoken to Byron like he belonged there. Not as a charity case, not as a joke, as an equal. Byron put the withdrawal form back into his bag. He looked at the ceiling and whispered, "Watch me, Grandma." Round 1 of the National Young Voices Championship began at 9 in the morning. 14 contestants were scheduled. Byron was slotted 11th, right after lunch, when judges were sluggish and audiences were restless. Not the worst slot, not the best, just forgettable enough to disappear. The first 10 performances were polished. Conservatory-trained voices singing conservatory-approved pieces. Safe, technical, impressive in the way that expensive training is always impressive. The audience clapped politely. The judges gave generous scores. A 20-year-old soprano from Whitfield performed a Broadway medley and received a 96. A 22-year-old tenor from Eastman sang a Sinatra arrangement and earned a 94. Then a 21-year-old baritone, blonde, square-jawed, the kind of face that belonged on a recruitment poster, performed a pop ballad. Nice voice, decent range, nothing extraordinary. Gregory Caldwell leaned into his microphone and called it a stunning display of musicality and control. He gave it a 98. Remember that number, 98. It matters later. Then came Byron. He walked out from the left wing of the stage with nothing. No coach trailing behind him. No vocal instructor watching from the front row. No parents in the audience holding flowers. Just a teenage kid in 2 short dress pants, glued together shoes, and a plastic grocery bag he'd left backstage because he didn't have a proper folder for his sheet music. 2,000 people looked at him, and you could feel the room recalculate. This didn't look like the others. This didn't look like anyone who had ever stood on this stage before. Gregory Caldwell leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. The second judge whispered something to the third, and they both smirked. Caldwell picked up his pen, the same pen he used to write glowing notes about the baritone 30 minutes ago, and held it over the scorecard like a verdict had already been reached. He tapped his microphone twice. Name? Byron Shaw. Institution? None, sir. Caldwell glanced at the other judges, a small theatrical shake of his head. The audience caught it. A few people in the front rows chuckled. All right, Byron Shaw from nowhere. He waved his hand, that same dismissive flick from earlier, like brushing away a fly. Go on, sing. Byron stepped to the microphone. He didn't adjust it. He didn't clear his throat. He didn't do any of the little rituals that trained performers learn to buy themselves time and settle their nerves. He just stood there, closed his eyes, and let the silence hold for 3 seconds. 3 seconds doesn't sound like much, but in a room with 2,000 people and live television cameras, 3 seconds of silence feels like a dare. Then he opened his mouth. The first note of Schubert's Ave Maria came out. Not soft, not timid, not the careful opening of someone trying to prove themselves. It came out full. It came out enormous. A warm, soaring, cathedral-filling tone that hit the back wall of the auditorium and bounced back like it owned the place. A woman in row 12 put her hand to her chest and held it there. A cameraman in the center aisle forgot to pan. The teleprompter operator looked up from his screen. In the sound booth, an engineer pulled off his headphones and leaned forward, mouth open, because what was coming through the monitors didn't match what his eyes were seeing. That sound, that impossible, radiant, full-bodied sound, was coming from an 18-year-old kid in broken shoes. Byron moved through the piece like he'd been born inside it. His vibrato was controlled and even, not the wobbly, manufactured vibrato of early training, but the natural, organic pulse that vocal coaches spend years trying to coax out of students and almost never succeed. His breath support was flawless. He held phrases that should have required 2 breaths on a single exhale, steady as a metronome, without a flicker of strain on his face. And his Italian diction was impeccable. Every vowel placed, every consonant clean. This was a boy who had never set foot in a language class, who had learned every syllable by listening to a scratchy vinyl record in a hot living room, over and over, until the music became part of his bloodstream. Backstage, the conservatory contestants stopped warming up. One by one, they gathered around the monitor. Nobody spoke. The blonde baritone who'd scored a 98 stood at the back of the group, arms at his sides, watching. A girl from Thornton turned to her coach and whispered, "Where did he come from?" The coach didn't answer. He didn't have one. Nathan Brooks stood closest to the screen. He'd been holding a water bottle. At some point during Byron's second verse, he set it down on the table and forgot about it entirely. When someone asked him later what he was thinking in that moment, he said, "I was thinking we're all in trouble." And then came the final passage. The last phrase of Ave Maria requires a sustained pianissimo, a long, soft, perfectly controlled high note that exposes every flaw a singer has. It's the moment where training either holds or collapses. It's where conservatory graduates stumble, where professionals crack, where even great singers sometimes choose to cut short and cover with volume. Byron didn't cut short. He didn't cover. He lifted his chin slightly, opened his throat, and released a note so pure, so weightless, so perfectly suspended in the air that the entire auditorium stopped breathing with him. It floated there. 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 7. Unwavering, luminous, like a single candle flame in a room with no wind. Then silence. 2 full seconds of nothing. 2,000 people frozen in place. And then the auditorium detonated. Not polite applause. Not the respectful clapping that had followed every other performer that day. This was a roar. A full-body, foot-stamping, seat-shaking eruption that started in the back rows and crashed forward like a wave breaking against the stage. People were on their feet before they even decided to stand. A woman in the balcony was crying. A man in row 4 turned to his wife and said, "What did we just witness?" At the judges' table, Pauline Voss, 30-year veteran, the most respected vocal coach on the panel, stood up and applauded. A judge standing during a round 1 performance had never happened before. Not once. Not in 22 years of this competition. Gregory Caldwell did not stand. He clapped. Slowly, mechanically, 3 precise claps that meant nothing. His face was tight. His jaw was locked. And here's the moment you need to watch. Right here. Look at his eyes. Because for a fraction of a second, barely a heartbeat, Something moved across Gregory Caldwell's face. The smirk was gone. The superiority was gone. What was left was something he would never admit out loud. It was the look of a man who had just been proven wrong in front of 2,000 people and 40 million viewers and knew it. Watch that moment again. Freeze it. That fraction of a second is the exact instant Gregory Caldwell knew he had made a mistake. But he didn't fix it. He scored Byron a 92. 92. For a performance that had just made a veteran judge stand for the first time in 2 decades. For Schubert's Ave Maria delivered with the precision and emotion of a world-class tenor. 92. The blonde baritone who sang a pop ballad before lunch got a 98. The narrator isn't going to tell you what to think about that. The numbers are right there. You can do the math yourself. Byron advanced to the semifinal. Of course he did. After a performance like that, even Gregory Caldwell couldn't justify cutting him without exposing himself. But advancing didn't mean the pressure stopped. It meant the pressure changed shape. The semifinal was scheduled 2 days later. 12 contestants remained. The performance order was announced the morning of, and Byron, who had been slotted 11th in round 1, was now moved to dead last. Slot 12. The final performance of the night, when judges are tired, scores trend lower, and half the audience has already checked out. Coincidence, maybe. But here's what wasn't a coincidence. 40 minutes before the show, a production assistant saw Diane Caldwell, Gregory's wife, co-chair of the organizing committee, standing in the backstage technical area, speaking quietly with the stage manager. She had no scheduled reason to be there. When the assistant approached, the conversation stopped. Diane smiled, adjusted her lanyard, and walked away without explanation. Nobody thought much of it at the time. Byron waited backstage for 4 hours. He didn't warm up with a coach. He didn't have one. He sat in a folding chair in the corner, eyes closed, mouthing lyrics, running the music through his body the only way he knew how. Alone. When his name was finally called, he walked to the stage the same way he had in round 1. No entourage, no fanfare, just him. He chose a different piece this time. A gospel soul arrangement that let him stretch into the upper register, the kind of raw, emotional territory where his voice lived most naturally. He stepped to the microphone, opened his mouth, and began. 45 seconds in, the microphone cut out, mid-phrase, mid-breath. One moment his voice was filling the auditorium through the speakers, and the next, nothing. Dead air. The monitors went silent. The speakers popped once and flatlined. Byron stopped singing. He looked at the microphone, tapped it twice. Nothing. He glanced toward the wings, where a stagehand was already scrambling. A replacement mic was rushed out. Byron took it, repositioned, started again. 15 seconds later, the second mic died. Total silence. 2,000 people staring at a boy holding a dead microphone in the middle of the biggest performance of his life. Somewhere in the front row, Diane Caldwell glanced at her phone. At the judges' table, Gregory Caldwell's face was perfectly neutral, except for one thing. A flicker. A micro-expression so brief that only the camera caught it. The faintest trace of a smile. Most singers would have frozen. Most would have turned to the wings, asked for help, waited for the technical team to fix the problem. Most would have apologized and walked off. Byron Shaw put the dead microphone back on the stand. He took one step back. He planted both feet on the stage floor. And he kept singing. No amplification, no speakers, no technology. Just his voice, raw, unprocessed, unassisted, thrown out into a 2,000-seat auditorium with nothing but the lungs God gave him, and 14 years of singing in a living room with no equipment, no air conditioning, and no audience except a grandmother listening from the kitchen. That living room had trained him for exactly this moment. His voice hit the back wall. Not faintly, not partially, fully. The acoustics of the hall caught his sound and carried it upward, outward, into every corner, every balcony, every seat. People in the last row stood up, not to applaud, not yet, just to confirm what they were hearing. A woman grabbed her husband's arm. Is that without a mic? It was. Phones came out, hundreds of them. Screens lit up across the auditorium like a field of stars. People weren't just watching, they were recording. They were posting. They were sending this to everyone they knew. Before Byron even finished the song, the clip was already spreading. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Hashtag No Mic No Problem started trending in Nashville within minutes. By the end of the night, it would be trending nationally. Backstage, Tommy Redman, the head sound technician, was already pulling apart the equipment. He'd checked both microphones personally 1 hour before the show. They were perfect. Now, examining the internal logs, he found something that made his stomach drop. Both wireless microphone frequencies had been manually switched to inactive channels. Not a glitch, not a malfunction. Deliberate interference. Someone had sabotaged that boy's microphone on purpose. Tommy saved the equipment logs, time-stamped, and locked them in his kit bag. He didn't say anything to anyone. Not yet. Here's what the numbers said. The National Young Voices Championship measured audience response with a decibel meter installed in the ceiling of the auditorium. An objective, mechanical reading that no judge could influence, no committee could adjust, and no bias could touch. After Byron's unmiked performance, that meter recorded the highest sustained audience response in the entire competition. Not just this round, the entire competition. Every round, every year. 22 years of history, and a boy with no microphone broke the record. Pauline Voss scored him 99 out of 100. She looked directly into the broadcast camera and said, "In 30 years of judging vocal competitions, I have never witnessed anything like what just happened on this stage." Gregory Caldwell scored him 88. 88, lower than his round 1 score of 92, for a performance that was, by every objective measure, more extraordinary. A performance that had just set a record. A performance done without amplification in a 2,000-seat hall. And Gregory Caldwell looked at that and wrote the number 88. In round 1, the blonde baritone sang a pop ballad and got 98. In the semifinal, Byron Shaw sang a cappella and shook the building and got 88. The pattern wasn't subtle anymore. It was arithmetic. By midnight, Byron's clip had 2 million views. By morning, it had 5. A renowned vocal coach, a woman who had trained 3 Grammy winners, posted an 8-minute analysis video breaking down Byron's technique frame by frame. Her conclusion, delivered with the kind of quiet authority that only decades of expertise can produce. This is not training. No conservatory on earth teaches this. What you are hearing is pure, God-given, once-in-a-generation talent. This young man's instrument is something science can describe but cannot replicate. That video alone got 600,000 views in 12 hours. Byron didn't watch any of it. He was sitting on his cot in the shared dormitory, phone pressed to his ear, listening to Loretta cry. "I told you, baby, the music doesn't know what color you are." He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked the question he'd been holding for years. "Grandma, what's on that tape?" Loretta paused, drew a slow breath. "After the final, baby, I promise." The performance went viral. The audience loved him. The internet loved him. The numbers didn't lie and the cameras didn't blink. Byron Shaw was the most talked-about contestant in the history of the National Young Voices Championship. Every major music outlet was running his name. Every social media platform was flooded with his face. And there was nothing Gregory Caldwell could do to stop it. So Diane Caldwell did what powerful people always do when talent threatens their control. She reached for the rulebook. The morning after the semifinal, while Byron was still sleeping on his cot in the shared dormitory, Diane filed a formal complaint with the competition's governing board. The complaint cited Article 9, Section 3 of the competition bylaws, a clause requiring all contestants to demonstrate verifiable formal vocal education. Diane's argument was surgical, clean, and bureaucratic. Byron Shaw had no institutional affiliation, no conservatory transcript, no certificate of completion, no record of any structured vocal training from any recognized program anywhere in the country. Therefore, his registration was incomplete, his advancement was illegitimate, and his continued participation was, in her carefully chosen words, a liability to the integrity and credibility of this competition. She submitted the complaint at 8 in the morning. By 9:30, the board had convened an emergency closed-door session. Gregory Caldwell recused himself, publicly, formally, with a carefully worded statement about avoiding any appearance of conflict of interest. It was a performance of fairness and nothing more, because Diane was in the room. She sat at the far end of the table with a printed copy of the bylaws, a highlighted registration form, and the quiet, steady confidence of someone who had already written the ending. At 11:15, a competition official found Byron sitting alone in the hallway, still wearing yesterday's clothes. "Mr. Shaw, your finalist status has been suspended pending board review. You are not cleared to perform in the final round at this time." Byron didn't shout, didn't slam the wall, didn't raise his voice. He asked one question. "Did I do something wrong?" The official looked at him for a moment, a flicker of something that might have been guilt, then handed Byron a printed notice and walked away without answering. Byron took the paper to the auditorium. It was empty now. No lights, no audience, no cameras, no applause. Just 2,000 vacant seats staring back at him and a dark stage that had, for a few extraordinary minutes the night before, belonged to him completely. He sat down in the front row, alone, and looked at that stage for a long time. He had quit his job to be here. The restaurant had already replaced him. Loretta had spent her arthritis medication money, the money that kept her hands from locking up, that kept her moving, that kept her alive, on his registration fee. He had poured everything into 2 performances that shook this building to its foundation, and now they wanted to erase all of it. Not because he couldn't sing, not because he wasn't good enough, because a woman with a highlighted rulebook decided his grandmother's living room didn't count. But someone else was angry too. Nathan Brooks walked into that board meeting uninvited. He sat down at the table without permission, still wearing his Whitfield Conservatory jacket, the same institution that had produced 3 of the competition's past champions. Diane looked at him like he'd tracked mud across her floor. "This is a board matter, Nathan. It doesn't concern you. It concerns every contestant here." Nathan opened a folder. Inside were printed newspaper clippings from the Memphis Daily Herald, community award certificates, a photocopy of a teaching credential issued by the Tennessee State Board of Education, all documenting one person, Loretta Shaw. 40 years directing the choir at Greater Grace Baptist Church. 26 years leading its vocal program. Twice recognized by the city of Memphis for excellence in community music education. Nathan laid each document on the table, one by one, like cards in a hand he'd been holding since round 1. The bylaws say formal vocal education. They don't say conservatory. His grandmother is a certified educator with a 40-year career. She trained him from the age of 4. That is formal vocal education. It just didn't happen inside your building. The room went silent. Nathan had done this research on his own, after round 1. Found the articles, printed them at the Hotel Business Center, carried them in a folder for days, just in case. He never told Byron, never asked for anything in return. He just showed up when it mattered. Diane's expression didn't change, but her hand, resting flat on the table, slowly curled into a fist. Nathan's folder slowed the board down, but it didn't stop them. The session was adjourned without a decision. Diane Caldwell left the room with her jaw set and her phone already pressed to her ear. The message was clear. This wasn't over. But something had shifted. The door Nathan kicked open didn't close behind him. Other people started walking through it. Tommy Redmond was first. The head sound technician had spent the previous night running diagnostics on both microphones that failed during Byron's semifinal performance. He'd pulled the internal logs, cross-referenced the frequency settings, and documented every detail with timestamps and serial numbers. What he found was unambiguous. Both wireless microphones had been manually switched to inactive channels within a 40-minute window before Byron's performance. The original frequencies, the ones Tommy had personally verified during the afternoon sound check, had been overwritten. Not corrupted, not glitched, overwritten. By someone who had physical access to the equipment and knew exactly what they were doing. Tommy brought his findings to the board in a sealed envelope. He didn't name suspects. He didn't make accusations. He simply placed the technical report on the table and said, "Someone sabotaged that boy's microphone on purpose. I have the data to prove it. What you do with it is up to you, but I'm not staying quiet about it." The envelope sat in the middle of the table like a grenade. Then came the contestants. 6 of the remaining 12 finalists, including Nathan Brooks, drafted a joint written statement and submitted it to the board before the end of the day. The statement was 1 paragraph long and said plainly that if Byron Shaw was disqualified on the basis of institutional affiliation, all 6 signers would withdraw from the competition immediately. No negotiation, no conditions. They would simply walk away. One of the signers posted the statement on Instagram. Within an hour, it had 40,000 shares. Within 3 hours, it was on every major entertainment news site in the country. Hashtag Let Byron Sing started trending nationally. Not in Nashville, not in Memphis, but nationwide. Millions of people who had never heard of the National Young Voices Championship were suddenly paying attention, and what they saw made them furious. Then came the voice that mattered most inside that room. Pauline Voss, 30-year judging veteran, the most respected vocal authority on the panel, the woman who had stood up and applauded during Byron's round 1 performance for the first time in her career, requested an emergency session with the board. She didn't write a letter. She didn't send a representative. She sat in that chair herself, looked the board members in the eye and said, "I became a judge to find extraordinary voices. That is the only reason I am here. If this competition silences a voice because it didn't come from the right zip code or the right institution, then we have failed at the one thing we exist to do. And I will not put my name on that failure. If Byron Shaw is removed, my resignation will be on this table within the hour." The room didn't breathe for 5 seconds. By 6 o'clock that evening, the board released a statement. Byron Shaw's finalist status was fully reinstated. The statement cited additional documentation confirming the contestants' eligibility, and made no mention of the sabotage report, the contestant petition, or Pauline Voss's ultimatum. It was the kind of statement institutions write when they've been backed into a corner and want to pretend they walked there on their own. Diane Caldwell was seen leaving the building without speaking to anyone. Gregory Caldwell released a one-sentence comment through his publicist. "I welcome all competitors and look forward to a fair final round." No one believed him. But it didn't matter anymore. Byron was back in. He found out from Nathan, who knocked on the dormitory door and said simply, "You're in. Tomorrow night. The final." Byron didn't cheer, didn't smile, didn't pump his fist. He sat on the edge of his cot, looked at the floor for a long time, and then picked up his phone. "Grandma." "I heard, baby. I heard." "Grandma, I need to hear the tape before I go on. I need to hear it." Loretta was quiet, the kind of quiet that holds years of waiting inside it. "Win or lose tomorrow, you call me right before you walk on that stage. I'll play it for you." She hung up. Byron sat there, holding the phone against his chest, and didn't move for a very long time. The final round, Saturday night. 6 contestants remained, every seat taken, standing room packed, a line of people outside who refused to leave. 43 million viewers on the live broadcast. Hashtag Let Byron Sing, still the #1 trend in the country. Camera crews from 4 national networks in the lobby. Whatever was about to happen, the whole world was going to see it. Byron was backstage, alone, sitting on the floor behind a curtain, knees to his chest, phone in both hands. His slot was last, this time by his own request. At 7:41, he dialed Loretta. She picked up on the first ring. No hello, she knew. "You ready, baby?" "I'm ready, Grandma." He heard her move through the house. The creak of the bedroom floor. The scrape of a shoebox pulled from under the bed. The soft click of an old cassette player. She held the phone to the speaker and pressed play. Static first, a low hiss of tape that had been sitting in darkness for 15 years. Then, a voice. A woman's voice, soft, clear, warm, singing a lullaby that didn't come from a song sheet but from somewhere deep inside a person's chest. Byron stopped breathing. He had never heard his mother's voice. Not once in 15 years. She had been gone since he was 3. Nothing left behind but a sealed letter and this tape. And now, her voice was filling his ear, and it sounded exactly like his. The same warmth, the same resonance, the same impossible fullness. Nobody had taught her either. The same gift, passed down through blood, through bone, through something no certificate could prove. Loretta's voice came through, barely steady. "She had the same gift you do, baby. Nobody taught her. Nobody taught you. She left because she thought you deserved better. But she didn't leave you with nothing." A pause. "That letter says, tell him to sing for both of us." Byron pressed the phone against his forehead. Tears hit the concrete floor without a sound. Then, quietly, "I will." He wiped his face, stood up, walked toward the stage. The auditorium fell silent the moment he appeared. Not the uncomfortable silence of round 1. Not the curious silence of the semifinal. This was 2,000 people and 43 million viewers holding their breath because everyone knew they were about to witness something that doesn't happen twice. Byron performed 2 pieces. The first, an aria from Puccini, full Italian opera delivered with the power and control of a lifelong conservatory student. Except he wasn't one. He had learned this from a scratchy vinyl record in a living room with no air conditioning, replaying the same passage until his voice absorbed it like water into dry earth. An 18-year-old black kid from South Memphis delivering Puccini at a level that trained graduates spend 4 years chasing and most never reach. Gregory Caldwell didn't move, didn't write, didn't blink. Then, without pause, without introduction, Byron shifted. His eye is on the sparrow. The same melody his mother sang on that cassette tape, reimagined as a gospel soul arrangement carrying every ounce of pain and hope he had ever held. He sang it looking directly into the camera, not at the judges, not at the audience, into the lens, as if his mother was watching from the other side. By the second verse, the audience was crying, not scattered tears, open, collective weeping, strangers holding hands, contestants backstage frozen with palms over their mouths, a cameraman wiping his eyes while fighting to keep the shot steady. The last note faded. Real silence, the kind that weighs something. Then the ovation, and it didn't stop. 3 minutes. People screaming his name, standing on chairs, the decibel meter in the ceiling maxed out and stopped registering. Gregory Caldwell sat motionless for 10 seconds. Then he stood, slowly, hands shaking, eyes wet. He pulled the microphone toward his mouth, and on live television, 43 million people watching, he said, "I was wrong." Silence. "I said I would eat my words on live television if this boy could sing. I'm eating them now. This young man is the most naturally gifted vocalist I have heard in my entire career." His voice cracked. No conservatory made this voice. God did. and I almost stopped him from being heard. I will carry that for the rest of my life." He sat down. The auditorium erupted, louder than before. The scores came in. Pauline Voss, 100. Second judge, 100. Gregory Caldwell, 100. A perfect, unanimous score. The first in 22 years. Byron stood on that stage, alone, tears streaming, and whispered 3 words the microphone barely caught, but the cameras saw on his lips. "For both of us." Byron Shaw won the National Young Voices Championship. When the announcement came, the auditorium didn't just cheer, it roared. A sound that rattled the chandeliers and shook the camera mounts and made the floor vibrate under 2,000 pairs of feet. Pauline Voss walked to the stage and placed the trophy in Byron's hands herself. She didn't say anything. She just held his shoulders for a moment, nodded once, and stepped back. That nod said more than any speech could. The audience chanted his name for 90 straight seconds. Byron stood there, holding the trophy against his chest with both hands, and let it wash over him. He didn't raise it above his head. He didn't strike a pose. He just held it the way you hold something fragile, something you spent your whole life not daring to believe was real. But the victory on stage was only the first half. The second half happened in the weeks that followed, and it was quieter, slower, and in many ways more important. The competition's governing board launched a formal investigation into the semifinal microphone sabotage. Tommy Redmond submitted his technical report. The equipment logs, the frequency records, the timestamps proving both wireless microphones had been manually switched to inactive channels within a 40-minute window before Byron's performance. Security camera footage from backstage was pulled and reviewed. The footage showed a production staff member accessing the sound equipment rack at 6:12 in the evening, 17 minutes after Diane Caldwell was recorded on a separate camera leaving the same backstage area. The staff member, when questioned, confirmed he had been asked to adjust the wireless settings for the final slot by a member of the organizing committee. He identified Diane Caldwell by name. Diane was permanently banned from the National Young Voices Championship and all affiliated events. Her co-chair title was revoked. Her name was removed from the organization's website, its donor wall, and its printed materials. She did not make a public statement. She did not apologize. Gregory Caldwell resigned from the judging panel 3 days later. His statement was 2 sentences long. "I have served this competition for over a decade, and I am proud of that service. It is time for me to step away and reckon with the ways I have fallen short." He did not mention Byron by name. He did not mention the scoring discrepancies. But the internet remembered. The internet always remembers. The competition board, under pressure from public scrutiny, media coverage, and a formal letter signed by Pauline Voss and 14 former judges, enacted 3 structural reforms. First, the bylaws were amended to remove the institutional training requirement, replaced with language recognizing demonstrated vocal ability through any verifiable form of musical education or practice. Second, an independent scoring review panel was established to flag statistical anomalies in judge scoring. Third, and this was the one that made Loretta cry when she heard about it, the competition created a new annual scholarship fund for talented vocalists from non-institutional backgrounds. The fund was named the Loretta Shaw Scholarship. Within 2 weeks of the final, Byron received full scholarship offers from 4 conservatories. He was 18. He signed his own paperwork. He chose a program, but before he accepted, he made one request. He asked that Loretta Shaw be formally listed in his academic record as his foundational instructor. The school agreed without hesitation. Nathan Brooks finished 3rd in the competition. On the last night, he found Byron in the hallway, and they stood there for a while, not saying much. Then Nathan extended his hand and said, "You didn't just win a competition, man. You changed how it works." They exchanged phone numbers. They stayed in touch. On his last night in Nashville, Byron sat alone in the dormitory room, the same cot, the same thin mattress, the same corner, and opened the envelope his mother had left 15 years ago. He unfolded the letter and read it. The narrator isn't going to tell you what it said. That belongs to Byron. What the cameras would have seen, if any had been there, was this: a young man sitting very still for a very long time, holding a single sheet of paper. Then, carefully, folding it along the original creases. Walking to his bag, pulling out the cassette tape, the competition badge, and the letter. Placing all 3 inside the shoebox Loretta had given him before he left Memphis. 3 generations in one box. A mother who left her voice behind. A grandmother who protected it. And a boy who carried it onto the biggest stage in the country and made the whole world listen. 1 year later, Byron Shaw walked onto the same stage. Same auditorium, same lights, same 2,000 seats. But everything was different. He wasn't a contestant this time. He was the invited headliner, the opening performer of the competition's anniversary gala, chosen by unanimous vote of the new judging panel. He walked out the same way he always did, alone. No entourage, no backing track, no accompaniment, just him. But the shoes were new, and the sheet music was in a leather folder, and Loretta was sitting in the front row, first time she had ever seen him perform in person on a real stage. She was wearing a dress she had bought with money from the scholarship fund that carried her name. Byron stepped to the microphone. The auditorium went silent. Not the silence of doubt, not the silence of judgment, not the silence of a room deciding whether someone deserved to be there. This was reverence. He looked out at the crowd. He looked at his grandmother. He closed his eyes, and he sang. A year ago, a man looked at this boy and saw nothing worth hearing. He threw a registration form at his chest and told him to leave. He called him a waste of time. He scored him low, sabotaged his microphone, tried to erase him with paperwork. That boy opened his mouth and made the whole world listen. No school gave him that voice. No teacher built that gift. It was always there, born in a living room, carried through a bloodline, waiting for a stage big enough to hold it.